Hello, this is the RPG Pundit, the final boss in internet shitlords. And here's Meatball. Say hello, Meatball. Oh, Meatball's busy licking her own ass. Okay. Well, now that you've had that gratuitous ass-licking shot, we'll get to the point. First of all, some of you who may have watched last night's episode of Inappropriate Characters, the longest one we've ever done, 3 hours long, and it would have kept going. It would have been another hour or more, I think, except that it ended up getting cut off. The guest star was Jeffro Johnson, and we were having a great. Essentially, it was me and him mostly having this big debate on the Bro SR versus the OSR, and it was a very productive debate. I think there was a lot of ideas exchanged. There were people that liked some of the things he said. There were people that thought I had owned him on some occasions. I think it was, on the whole, though, I think it was just a very interesting debate because we touched on a lot of the things about what defines how role-playing should be. Unfortunately, it got cut off when Job's, that is to say, Florida Man RPG's internet, because he's the tech mod, when that was shut down. So it seemed very abrupt. We'll probably have him back on for round 2 one of these days. Maybe not our next episode, but at some point relatively soon. I hope you enjoyed it anyways. It was huge. It's 3 hours. My God. And today I'm going to talk to you about what would have actually been, we were so foolish and naive to think that we weren't going to end up, our normal show is about an hour long, right? Sometimes 90 minutes. And we were so naive to think that we weren't going to occupy that length entirely with me and Jeffro debating, right? So we were so naive that we had a second topic. And that second topic, since we couldn't do it last night, I'm going to do it here on this video. I don't know how long this video is actually going to be because I don't think this is a topic that has a lot that needs to be debated or discussed about it. But the topic is, if you take a look at these books here, these are some of the greatest RPG books ever made, right? Obviously, Lion and Dragon, World of the Last Sun, Old School Companion, all of them fantastic products that you should pick up. But there's one in particular that I did not have anything to do, which is the first edition DM's Guide. I could have probably put the 5th edition DM's Guide, and then that would also have been a book I had something to do with. But since, in homage to Jeffro, and since, we do both agree, me and him, that this is still the best DMG ever produced, I put the first edition on there. You see, that's called a Dungeon Master's Guide. And there's apparently now the latest thing from the Twitter woke crowd is a demand that you can no longer use the term Dungeon Master. And, it sounds very stupid, but I think you're going to guess, obviously, why that is. And if you haven't, you're just not going to believe it, right? But you can't use the term Dungeon Master, according to these people, because the word master implies a slave owner, right? That's the only way, apparently, for them that word is ever used, right? Is that somebody who owns slaves, So basically, if you're using Dungeon Master, you're a white supremacist. If you use that term in your games, you're a white supremacist, right? And so these guys, some people say, "Oh, well, come on, that's just like one person, right?" Well, actually, I caught it when it was one person who proposed this. I don't remember her name, but I have a tweet back there where I quoted it and pointed out how stupid this was. But I knew I repeated this immediately because I knew right away that this was going to happen, right? That it was going to go viral because the concept is just perfect for what the woke RPG Twitterati want to push and insist upon, right? And so you're going to see them campaigning like this is going to build up, right? There are now several people on the woke D&D Twitter that are insisting that the term Dungeon Master is a deeply problematic word. It implies white supremacy and slavery and needs to stop being used by people. And you're going to see, I think, in light of the announcement that there's going to be a special edition of D&D 5th edition, or a revised D&D 5th edition, or something. It's not very clear what yet, in 2024. I think you're going to see people very strongly lobbying for it to no longer be Dungeon Master, the term, to change the term, because that term is evil and offensive, apparently, right? So that's what we're looking at from this crowd, that apparently don't get that, you know, master has a number of different applications. You can be a master of a skill, right? You can be a master of knowledge. You can be a master in an activity, right, that has nothing to do with owning somebody else. Also, a master implies somebody in a class scale, right, that is someone who is an employer of somebody else, right? It's a bit old-fashioned these days to refer to your boss as the master or something like that, even if you're in like domestic service or something. But that is a term that comes from there, and it comes out of, you know, the Latin magister, right? And people have master's degrees, for example, which implies that they're a master on a particular topic, say religious studies or something like that, right? And I mean, are they going to change? Yeah, they probably are going to argue that has to be changed too, right? Because to them, the only thing that matters is porting this into something that allows them to deconstruct. So if they can pretend that the only context in which master is used is the racist context of white people owning black slaves, then they're going to pretend that that's the case, right? And they're going to pretend that everything is about that, and so it has to be removed, right? And that if you don't agree, you know, I'm sure that some of them, the more intelligent ones, will say, well, yeah, maybe it can have other uses, but this is a hurtful word for a community that I, as a probably not even black person, represent. I'm speaking for them because I'm an upper class liberal elite, and therefore, you know, you have to be anti-racist and remove this term master, because every time they hear that, it brings trauma to them about something that happened 100 years ago. You know? And so the implication will be that if you disagree, the only possible reason is that you're a racist, and therefore anybody who wants to keep using the term Dungeon Master is unquestionably a racist RPG gamer. Yeah. That's what you're going to find. So the question does come to mind of, like, you know, well, what are they going to change it with? You know, and my suggestion, I think that what they're going to, because they can't call it just Game Master, right? Like, there are a lot of RPGs that say Game Master instead of Dungeon Master. Now, they could call it the referee, but I think that they're not going to either, because that implies too much. That I don't know. That sounds a little bit too much like sports, and sports sound a little bit too much like toxic masculinity or something. So I think that they're probably going to call it the Dungeon Manager, which gets a great opportunity for us to also rename players, right? Players shouldn't be called players. They should be called, you know, players of that, you know, revised edition product that has a Dungeon Manager instead of a Dungeon Master. The players should be called Karens. Because that way, whenever they don't get their way, they can complain to the Dungeon Manager. And the Karens will, you know, obviously be the ones that will insist that they have the power in that dynamic. And they probably will by then, because, of course, the thing that the crowd that are now taking control of 5th edition want to do is to remove the individual authority of DMs. They want it to be about the diverse authority of players obeying the mandates that are coming from people like Jeremy Crawford about how you should play, right? That's what they need if they're going to enforce a type of totalitarianism that is the exact opposite of what 5th edition was meant to be. You know, that's one of the things that came up last night in the debate with Jethro, is that, you know, there's different ways you can rank the hierarchy of RPG play, right? And so ironically, story gamers and the Bro SR both use the same hierarchy, which is different from real old school gaming and the OSR. Because real old school gaming and the OSR, if you rank the hierarchy of power in gameplay, the top is the Dungeon Master. The second one is the rules, and the bottom rung is the players. The players have their only real power in a proper and standard old school role-playing game is basically the power to play their own character within the limits of the construct that the DM has created, and of course the power to leave the table, to say, sorry, screw you, I'm leaving, I don't like this game. They always have that power, right? But in, story gaming and in the Bro SR, the top thing is the designer in the context of the rules, right? Like they say, so the rules are the top, but what they really mean in the story gaming movement is the game designer. What they really mean in the Bro SR is Drivethru Johnson's interpretation of the first edition DMG, and what they're really going to mean in the future of Wizards of the Coast D&D is the cabal of ultra-leftists in control of Wizards who will dictate what must be done, right? And so that's going to be at the top. In the middle is the players, and at the bottom is the DM, where the DM is reduced to little more than just a monopoly banker. They're not allowed to make their own decisions or change things, right? They have to follow the mandate of the designer, the rule, whether you call it rules as written, or whether you call it, collaborative storytelling, or whether you call it social justice. That's the idea. And the purpose of that is to allow an extension of a top-down control over the game that creates a certain experience. Now, of course, in the case of, I'm not suggesting that Drivethru Johnson and the Bro SR are the same as SJWs. They have the same kind of hierarchy, but they have a different purpose. Because in the case of the Bro SR, it's to create this style of play that they treat as an experience of recreating how D&D originally was in some primordial Hyperborean golden age, right? Which is not real, it's a fantasy, but there it is, right? On the other hand, for the SJWs, the purpose of that top-down control is in order to transform D&D into a method of indoctrination into their ideology. I can see it happening, right? The DMG obviously will have to change its name too. It could just become the Dungeon Master's Guide, but I think it'll probably become something more like the Safety Checklist and Diversity Guide for Game Organizing Persons. That's my recommend. I'm going to submit that to Wizards as the way that they should call their next Dungeon Master's Guide. The Safety Checklist and Diversity Guide for Game Organizing Persons. Yeah. You can feel free to add your own suggestions in the comments if you think that there's a different and better one of those. But I'm guessing that this topic is not going to disappear, that the SJWs are going to keep insisting on it, and they're probably going to come up with some ridiculous substitutes in the near future, and then I will get to mock them ruthlessly, and you'll come here and watch me mock them, and everybody will benefit. You'll have a good time. I'll get some views. Please share my video too if you can. So anyways, I guess that's about it for today. If you want to support me, even though I do have a Patreon, that's there. If you don't play RPGs and somehow still want to give me money because I'm fighting the good fight or something, or if you've bought every RPG I have, then go ahead and put some money in my Patreon account. But if not, buy my books. World of the Last Sun, Spectacular Gonzo Gaming, the Old School Companion 1 and 2. This is 2 here. This is brand new, well, relatively brand new. It came out at the beginning of the year. It's 320 pages of medieval authentic, old school adventuring. Trust me, no social justice stuff there. It's all stuff based on medieval myth, legend, history, monsters, and mayhem. Lion and Dragon, the platinum best-selling medieval authentic OSR RPG. You haven't actually played medieval fantasy until you've played Lion and Dragon. It's that simple. D&D is not medieval fantasy as a rule. It's a Renaissance fair medieval funtime land fantasy RPG, and there's nothing wrong with that. But if you want to play a game that has a much more medieval style and edge to it, check out Lion and Dragon. Or check out the RPG Pundit Presents PDF series, Star Adventurer, Cults of Chaos. There's so many of them. You know them all by now. Those of you who have been my regular watchers. All the links are in the description below. You pick up a product, you're going to get something that you can use, that you can mix with other products in the OSR, or with your D&D campaign. You can use them probably even if you're running 5e. though for as long as they allow you to use non-licensed stuff in 5e. And you know, you're getting something. I don't, you know, like one of the things I love, I said this last night at in the live stream, is how many people have messaged me to tell me that how they've played or how they've used my games or my supplements, and sometimes in ways that I had no idea that they would do that, right? And I love it. You know, like they invent something, an application for one of my games or one of my books or one of my products that is not much to do with my idea of what it was for, but they find a way to make it work for them. And to me, that's the goal. It's always about the DM. The DM is the one that best knows the table of the people he's running for, you know, and how to make the game and the product and the politics even, I guess, though I would say that the best politics at the table is no politics at the table. But, you know, your mileage may vary, again, because you know better, you know your gaming group better than I do, right? So look at that, and yeah, check out my products. You're getting something that you can use, and you're giving me some support in return. Also, spread this video around, share it, post it anywhere where you think people will find this interesting or where they're going to get pissed off about it, and subscribe if you haven't subscribed. Thank you very much. Currently smoking. This is a Nerup Cuddy with Argento Natural, and goodbye. Goodbye from Meatball. Bye-bye, Meatball.